We're going to begin with Hollywood grinding to a halt as thousands of actors head to the picket line today.
The Screen Actors Guild voted unanimously to go on strike. The union was not able to reach a deal on a new contract with the industry's leading studios. This will be the first time film and TV performers have had a work stoppage like this since 1980. After announcing the strike yesterday at a news conference, SAG-AFTRA's president, Fran Drescher, spoke with NBC News about the state of the business.
I'm profoundly disappointed. I think I was naive to think that the people that I have proudly been in business with for decades throughout my career could behave in this way. Actors want to work. Performers want to work. Workers want to work. What is this maniacal need to put people out of business?
This is the first time we've seen both actors and Hollywood writers on strike at the same time since 1960. That's when Ronald Reagan was the SAG president. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin has more on what this all means for your favorite movies and shows.
An unprecedented Hollywood shutdown. SAG-AFTRA, which represents 160,000 actors, saying they'll strike after failing to reach an agreement with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which represents studios including NBC Universal.
How they plead poverty, that they're losing money left and right when giving hundreds of millions of dollars to their CEOs. It is disgusting.
Actors will join writers who have been picketing since May for the first joint strike since 1960. The breakdown in negotiations came down to streaming residuals and AI protections. Disney CEO Bob Iger responding to the actors' demands in an exclusive interview with CNBC.
There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic. That is, quite frankly, very disruptive.
At the London premiere of Oppenheimer, Matt Damon and Emily Blunt walking out after appearing on the red carpet amid news of the strike.
They are fighting not for themselves, but for the rest of the guild, because the most powerful members can pick up the least powerful members.
The duet strike is unlike anything we've seen in decades. Films currently in production like Deadpool 3 and Wicked are expected to immediately come to a halt. Movies already set to be released, like Barbie and Meg 2, will still hit theaters, but A-list celebrities won't participate in any promotion, which will impact studio profits. The strike comes as studios scramble to cash in on streaming, while at the box office, Indiana Jones and The Flash have failed to break even. Questions remain how long it could take to get the show back on the road. Dana Griffin, NBC News, Los Angeles.
We're joined now by Brian Steinberg, senior TV editor for Variety. Brian, good morning. So after weeks, 4 weeks really, of negotiating with the trade association that represents major companies like Disney and Netflix, the Guild says the production studios remain, quote, unwilling to offer a fair deal on key issues essential to its members. Break down what some of the Guild's biggest concerns are that did lead to this strike.
I think, good morning, one of the biggest concerns really is just getting paid in a world where making TV and movies has become a lot harder. Streaming is not the financially rewarding endeavor that traditional TV and movies have been. There are fewer episodes. Once a thing is made, it doesn't get sold again and again. So the way that actors made money, residuals and the like, have declined, and they're looking for more security and a new system as they enter into the streaming business.
So, Brian, this group on the studio side, it's called the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. That's who's representing the studios. Part of what they have said in response to all this is that this was certainly not the outcome we hoped for, as studios cannot operate without the performers that bring our TV shows and films to life. You know, I think that seems obvious if there are no actors, actresses, and anything. Hello. I do want to point out, just aside again, NBC Universal's parent company, Comcast, is one of the companies represented by this group. But they say that they presented a deal that offered this historic pay and residual increases. Obviously, we just heard from a CEO there, Bob Iger, in this piece that played before you were talking, kind of saying that it was not realistic. I think when we're all watching, we're kind of like, some of this is a he said, she said. So was it unrealistic or was it fair? Do you think that this group representing the studios now is going to have to reconsider if all of these actors are walking off?
Clearly, there's the impasse. I think, look, from the studio side, these companies are under tremendous pressure right now. Comcast, Paramount, Disney. Things are not going well. Their viewers are leaving for streaming. It's hard to make money off of them. There's an advertising downturn right now, and there's the current upfront negotiation where TV guys try to book their ads for the next season. Hasn't gone that great this year. There's a perfect storm of economic headwinds facing these big companies, and that is probably one reason why they're very loath to kind of open their purse strings right now.
So we're going to see the actors on the picket line starting at noon Eastern today on both coasts. As for viewers who love these shows, how are things going to change? Right away, we may not see a major difference, but what's going to be the impact to both the shows and the movies that we watch?
I think there's a cushion until the fall. Summer movies are already in the can. Summer TV shows still around. But I do think as the year winds on, we get into the fall and the holiday season, the cover's going to go bare. You might see fewer original shows, more news, more sports, more reality programming, more unscripted programming. And I think as you may even see some of the companies curate things from Canada, United Kingdom, New Zealand, shows that at least in the U.S. haven't been seen but might fit into a thing. They could license them for a lesser fee and put that on the air. It might be interesting. But the cover's going there. The pipeline is going to be empty as time goes on.
All right. Brian Steinberg, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Turning now to the weather, from severe storms and flooding to dangerous heat, much of the country could see some kind of extreme weather conditions today.
This morning, 80 million people across the country are under heat alerts. Some states where they've seen triple-digit temperatures for days, even weeks. Get this. Well, now they're bracing for record high heat over the weekend. Many areas are expecting temperatures well over 110 degrees. Phoenix is just one of the cities baking in this oppressive heat, but other cities in the south and southwest could see records fall as those temperatures rise. Elsewhere in the country, flooding is a major concern in the southeast. Torrential rain in central Mississippi triggered flash flooding yesterday. The thunderstorms dumped over a foot of rain, washing out roads, flooding homes and businesses. And of course, we've been talking about what's going on in the northeast, and just what we do not need is coming our way. More heavy rain after that unprecedented flooding earlier this week. Cleanup in Montpelier, Vermont is expected to take several months, and yesterday city officials announced City Hall is closed indefinitely due to hazardous floodwater damage.
So with another weekend of record-breaking temps on the way, let's get your morning news now weather.
That means Angie Lastman is with us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. I wish I had some good news when it comes to some cooling temperatures, but we just don't. In all those same areas, we once again are waking up to heat alerts. It includes more than 80 million people from places stretching from Portland to Sacramento, down through Phoenix, down through Houston, New Orleans, and even Miami included in this for another day of record-breaking heat in a lot of spots. Let's start in the Southwest, where this heat warning that you see, again, from Las Vegas to Palm Springs and south towards Phoenix, that is going to last until Tuesday. So at least through the weekend into the early part of next week, we are continuing to see these temperatures remain oppressive. Along the Gulf Coast, it's the feels-like temperatures. It's that added humidity with the really moist air in place, where triple digits will be what we feel like into the afternoon hours. Places like Corpus Christi headed to 112 feels like, 102 for Memphis, 97 degrees for what it feels like in Myrtle Beach. Not alerts up through parts of the mid-Atlantic per se, but still some really summer-like and uncomfortable conditions that are going to prompt many people to be potentially staying in the AC or headed to the pool. Through tomorrow, these temperatures don't change a whole lot. It's still the triple digits for your heat index values, and that goes well through the weekend and into early next week. On the other hand, we're going to continue to see that heat dome in place for parts of the Southwest. This is where these temperatures are just really incredible in many spots and have been for weeks on end. Palm Springs, 119 for your afternoon high today, 121 by Saturday, and we keep that temperature for Sunday. Las Vegas goes to 111 this afternoon, ends up at 115 tomorrow, and Sunday hits 117 degrees. These are going to be temperatures that are going to bring numerous records across the country. And check out some of these potential records that we could be seeing. 117 on Sunday that I mentioned, that would be an all-time high for the city of Las Vegas. Death Valley is expected to hit 130 degrees. That would put it in the top 5 global records. That means they're in the top 5 anywhere on Earth, any day. Since we've been keeping records, that would be one of the warmest temperatures for the top 5. Phoenix is going on 14 consecutive days of 110 degrees or higher, and El Paso, 28 straight days of 100 or higher if they head through Sunday with those temperatures, which they are expected to do exactly that. So the West heat, guys, there's no relief from it. Meanwhile, in the East, It's the heavy rain, the showers and thunderstorms. We mentioned that in parts of the Northeast, we could be looking at more potential flooding concerns with some heavy rain headed that way. It looks like the most unsettled day is going to be Sunday, but we'll have those scattered showers around through the weekend.
I do not want to know what 130 degrees feels like.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does. It's scary, to be honest.
I know that Death Valley is known for temperatures like that, but to hear top 5 global record, oof.
Incredible.
All right, Angie, thank you so much. Well, as Andrew just said, Vermont and upstate New York are bracing for the possibility of more flooding on top of the catastrophic flash floods that we've been following all week. Meanwhile, the Southwest is dealing with record-breaking heat. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin has more on the extreme weather conditions, including the latest on the damaging storms that touched down near Chicago.
From coast to coast, Mother Nature's onslaught is unrelenting. Multiple tornadoes touching down around Chicago.
Right there.
Oh my God. Wreaking havoc at the O'Hare International Airport and leaving a trail of destruction with dozens of homes damaged.
All of a sudden, it was going all around. It was blowing all over. So there was like no way to go to protect yourself from it.
NBC's Maggie Vespa is there.
We're here in McCook, Illinois, where if you come into room 5, you can see the roof of this motel is completely gone. Here's that same shot from above. The owner says thankfully no one was inside when the storm came through.
Over the road, bro.
And flash flooding in Mississippi, triggered by torrential rains. Multiple roads and buildings submerged.
My store is currently underwater.
This comes as more than 84 million Americans sweat through triple-digit temperatures, triggered in part by a deadly heat dome that only tightens its grip on the Southwest. In Texas, the demand for electricity reaching its highest point ever. After 2021's rolling blackouts, there's fresh concern for that state's power grid. Miami now 33 consecutive days with a heat index over 100 degrees. And Sin City is scorching. Las Vegas poised to tie its all-time heat record, 117 degrees this weekend. On the Strip, even the pavement is dangerous.
It is super hot out here, and so like the bottom of my shoes, I'm worried that it's going to get stuck to the concrete and melt.
Nevada's only level 1 trauma center is reporting a troubling rise in severe burns from the superheated streets.
The pavement can heat up to 160 to 170 degrees, and all it takes is a couple of seconds of your skin being exposed to that to create a second-degree burn.
73-year-old Air Force veteran Christopher Malcolm was waiting for the bus when he suddenly felt faint.
I was feeling overheated, and so I sat down on a sidewalk.
Unable to get up, the hot pavement seared through his pants, causing third-degree burns, which required surgery.
I feel lucky to be alive.
Yet another casualty of the brutal summer heat that has the potential to be the deadliest yet.
Thanks to Aaron McLaughlin for that report.
President Biden is back at the White House after a week filled with important overseas summits. Following the U.S. Nordic summit in Finland yesterday, the president discussed the war in Ukraine and slammed a U.S. senator who he says is jeopardizing national security. NBC News chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander reports.
As the fighting rages on in Ukraine with that country's counteroffensive against Russian forces stalled, President Biden declaring the outcome is already clear.
Putin's already lost the war.
Here in Helsinki, the president formally welcomed NATO's newest member, the alliance bringing in Finland that shares an 830-mile border with Russia, demonstrating how President Biden says Vladimir Putin's invasion has backfired, insisting Russia cannot keep up this fight for years.
Eventually, President Putin is going to decide it's not in the interest of Russia, economically, politically, or otherwise, to continue this war.
The president singling out Putin in the same room where 5 years ago, former President Trump seemed to accept Putin's denials about election interference over the assessments of U.S. intelligence agencies. Mr. Biden also weighing in on that failed military rebellion led by one-time Putin ally Yevgeny Prigozhin, who has not been seen in public since.
We're not even sure where he is. If I were he, I'd be careful what I ate.
The president here taking aim at a growing controversy back in Washington, too, slamming Alabama Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville for blocking hundreds of senior military promotions, including for a new Joint Chiefs chairman, to protest the Pentagon's recent policy change on abortion.
He's jeopardizing U.S. security by what he's doing. It's just totally irresponsible in my view.
Tuberville's been objecting to the new policy that provides government-paid time off and reimburses travel costs for service members and their dependents seeking abortions. He says that change required Senate approval.
You can't turn around and change the law with a memo. I mean, that's all I'm saying. All I've asked is let's get a vote on the floor.
Tuberville is also facing criticism from fellow Republicans for holding up those military promotions. And we just learned Defense Secretary Austin spoke with Tuberville, warning him about the impact on military readiness.
All right, Peter, thank you so much.
Let's now bring in NBC News chief, international analyst, and former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, Admiral James Stavridis. Good to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time this morning. So the president said at that press conference in Finland that Russia had, quote, already lost the war and that Moscow will eventually decide it's not in its interest to continue. This was an answer to a question from a reporter. Does the situation on the battlefield actually support those comments? Has Putin already lost this war?
I think so, as follows. At this minute, the Ukrainians are on the front foot in the ground war. They are marshaling the armor, the tanks, the armor personnel carriers that they were provided in the spring, and look for a significant Ukrainian movement to crack that long Russian fighting line and drive to the Black Sea. I'm sure the president is receiving a lot of intelligence. On the graphic you're showing, they'll drive right through that red area to the right, down to that Black Sea region. And when they do that, you're going to see the Russian armed forces in big trouble. And to conclude, no one should be surprised by this because Ukraine has the high ground morally. They're getting the best equipment from the West. And financially, we are strongly supporting them against a very weak Russia. Cards do not look good for Vladimir Putin.
And I want to ask you about another factor on the ground and see if you think that this is also helping in this regard. The Pentagon said yesterday that Wagner Group forces are no longer participating in any significant capacity, was the quote. In Ukraine, we know that this mercenary group was instrumental in capturing parts of eastern Ukraine. How do you think that impacts the fighting on the ground?
Oh, very directly. Probably 30,000 of the best fighters have essentially been withdrawn from an overall effective fighting force that's perhaps 100,000, 120,000. So figure about a third of the really effective troops have been pulled from those front lines, along with all their equipment. You're showing pictures of it now. It's a significant challenge. But there's an even worse aspect to all this, which is the morale piece of this. If you are a Russian soldier in the regular Russian army and you've been shoulder to shoulder with the Wagner Group and suddenly they're gone and all you're hearing about is rebellion and the generals in revolt and Yevgeny Prigozhin marching on Moscow, when you hear all that, it just makes your heart hurt as a Russian soldier on the front line. So there's both a practical aspect, which you mentioned, and a significant morale aspect. Again, this is why Russia's long-term look here on the battlefield is not good.
While we have you, Admiral, I also want to ask you about another story that was sort of at the end of my colleague Peter Alexander's piece that aired just before we started talking about President Biden criticizing Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville for blocking hundreds of senior military promotions to protest the Pentagon's recent policy change on abortion. What do you make of that? What type of concern is there that those things are being blocked?
It's of enormous national security concern, and we see our excellent Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, addressing it head on. He called Tuberville yesterday. Look, Senator Tuberville used to be a football coach. He ought to understand that teams need leadership. They need stable leadership at the top. When you pull that away and you have a bunch of acting commanders, we have no commandant of the Marine Corps for the first time in well over 100 years. It hurts your efforts. And here's a news flash. National security is not a game. This is real. We need the top people. That means the Senate needs to do its job and pass the confirmation of the selected leaders.
Admiral Stavridis, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.